Hi, everybody. It's Raj. Oh, probably should look at the camera when I do that. There you go. Hi, everybody. It's Raj. Welcome to Raj Against the Machine. We're doing something different today. This is our very first interview with someone, and I'm honored to have that person be Lauren Cibene. She has a book coming out in May called Tiger in a Lifeboat that fits really well with the kinds of things we talk about around here about faith. I particularly love her book because it's got a lot about India, which is obviously near and dear to my heart as someone who is Indian American. And so I'm super grateful to have her be our very first guest on the Substack podcast, whatever this is. And I hope you enjoy the conversation today. Lauren, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Raj. I'm so honored to be here and to be the first.
Well, hopefully not the last. Hopefully I don't crash and burn this thing. Um, so I'd love to hear. I mean, I've had a chance to read Tiger in a Lifeboat, but let's maybe just start from the top of what's the book about.
Sure. Yeah. So the book is a travelogue, and it tracks two journeys, really. It tracks my external journey through India, and it tracks my internal journey through faith deconstruction, trauma healing, and basically, it's a story of me learning how to retrust.
Yeah. So let's talk about faith deconstruction. It took me a long time to be able to talk about this publicly, but I
Mm.
also think for some people, especially who came to my mailing list through just knowing me, don't even really know what that is. So can you just kind of talk us through like what is faith deconstruction?
Yeah, this is a good question. It's so hard to wrap language around this experience. And part of the reason for that is that it's very unique, it's very individualized. No two journeys are the same. So, deconstruction, while it's become kind of this like buzzwordy, like hot button term, it actually is very unique for each person. For me, it looked kind of like, gosh, like I struggle to even find an analogy. I know Sarah
Mhm.
Bessey has written about, for her, deconstruction was like going up to the attic and starting to sort through all of the things that she had acquired and realizing these are
Mm,
things that I don't need and these are things that I do value and that do reflect my beliefs and who I am as a person and what I've seen. My deconstruction process was a little more violent. It was initiated, and this is unique in itself, but it was initiated by one traumatic event in my life. A lot of people talk about deconstruction happening gradually. It's like this event by attrition almost that happens
yeah.
with these tiny little cuts that culminate into this big event that happens. For me, it was a little bit more sudden. But yeah, I mean, I'm curious what because you would you say that you have deconstructed as well?
Yes. I would say I'm somewhere in the process of deconstruction, reconstruction. I'm not really sure what label I'd put on it to your point of it being kind of difficult to pin down. I think that one of the things that I would tell people is that in the circles that we come from, the evangelical church, people kind of see it as a binary where it's like you are in or you are out.
Mm-hmm.
And so deconstruction would just with what the word sounds like, oh, this is the process of you leaving the faith forever, becoming apostate, becoming worldly, whatever words on it that you want to, but that it's this process of just giving into the world. You were never really one of us, that kind of thing. And what's hard about it is that I think to a certain degree, I don't know about you. I'm curious to hear about your story, but for me, I had to be willing to do that. Like I had to be willing to leave it all, throw it all away in order to truly kind of get down to the foundation of things and get to the roots of things. And I don't even know that if I'm really fully there yet, but it's weird because it's both not completely leaving and abandoning your faith, but you have to everything has to be on the table in order for you to actually be at any kind of point where you maybe ever could rebuild. And it's not a
Mm-hmm.
this you are definitely going to rebuild it. For some people, it is fully leaving and not being able to hold on to anything. For other people, which probably is a little bit closer to your story, it's about the process of the way back. And I would say I'm probably somewhere in between. I don't think that I'll probably ever be an evangelical again. In fact, all of the substacks so far that I've written have been about why I left the evangelical church. I mean, it's this process of reconciling who you really are on the inside with the faith that you've been taught, the faith that you've been enculturated into.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really weird because it feels so transgressive. The Bible talks about, and evangelicals will remind you all the time, it's like the heart is wicked and desperately sick. And it's like, don't trust it, don't trust it. And so even just the process of saying, like, I'm not sure if this is who I am, feels really selfish. It feels really self-important. And it feels sinful according to the ways that we've been taught. But what I find
Yeah.
to be really ironic in the whole process is that these are the same people who will tell you in a service that, like, oh, if the Spirit's moving you right now, then listen to that. And so it's
Mm-hmm.
like your heart's desperately sick and wicked, but if your heart's telling you right now to listen, you should listen. And so I think that even just kind of starting from there, there's this tension between sometimes we listen to it, sometimes we don't. And maybe the people who are telling us what to do don't necessarily know what's best for us at all times.
Yeah.
And there's a process of going, like, hey, I'm at this point in my life where I am fully responsible for myself. Like I'm not a dependent of my parents anymore. And even if I respect or fall under the teaching of, whatever pastor or elders or whatever, I have to own my life choices until I die. And for me, a lot of deconstruction is kind of around that, of just going, like, I'm not sure if who I am on the inside really matches all of these things around me, and that feels like such a dangerous transgressive process. I don't know. Do you?
Mm-hmm.
I know I'm interviewing you, but I just talked for a long time. What do you?
No, no,
Does
it's a
that resonate with
conversation.
you?
Absolutely. It absolutely does. And there's something like you mentioned where we grow up in this culture that tells us that we are not trustworthy.
Yeah.
And that resonates so strongly with me. So when I entered into this deconstruction season, like when I first walked into it, that was such a huge sticking point for me because I didn't know who to trust. Like
Yeah.
my the traumatic event that happened in my life had to do with a massive betrayal. So my trust was fractured, in that relationship. It spread to like the other close relationships in my life. It spread institutionally. I lost trust in institutions, in the church. There was all of this distrust. And then on top of that, I still had that like infection, that evangelical infection where we're afraid to trust ourselves. So there
Yeah.
was literally, I mean, I was completely unmoored. There was nothing that I really trusted at that time. And it's so disorienting and terrifying. Nobody chooses to walk into something like that.
100%. Yeah. I mean, I have friends who left the Mormon church, which is even more like it's your life, it's your social circle, it's everything. And I know that there's people within that community who fully do not believe what the church teaches, but are so afraid to leave their family, their social structure, everything, that they won't do it.
Mm,
And it feels similar. Thankfully, it's not as um, it's not as black and white with the evangelical community, but it does feel like, I've started several posts myself that go, I know that this is going to hurt my mom's feelings. It's one of the most basic rules of the universe, like to not hurt your mom's feelings, and
yeah.
or, or the Sunday school teacher, or like all these wonderful, nice people that you have been around and have many of whom have done great things, never done bad things to you. And so then you go, okay, like, why am I just purposefully hurting all these people, or why am I purposefully dragging this thing out and talking about our dirty laundry here? Can you talk about that process? Can you talk about, like, Is it selfish?
I would say I'm tempted to say yes. I'm tempted to
Mm,
say that it is selfish, but in the most important, critical way. This is like, in my opinion, a put on your own oxygen mask before you can help others put on their oxygen masks situation.
mm,
For me, because I feel the same tension. I kind of resonate with your Mormon friends because I was home educated by my parents at home. Our curriculum was very heavily evangelical influenced, creationism, biology, and stuff like that. I mean, we weren't crazy, but we were. It was everything. It was all of our life. It was just every mentor, every friend that I had. It was in the evangelical sphere. So when I did end up going through this deconstruction process, like it's terrifying to feel like you're leaving everything, and you're letting people down and you're hurting their feelings. And um yeah, and at some point, and I remember early on, like I was really just stuffing it all down. I was just like
yeah.
ignoring it. I was, denying it, and I was just, it was crazy. And I remember my dentist, like this was, this is something my dentist told me. She was like, if you don't stop clenching your teeth, like you
Mm,
are going to have your jaw muscles, like you're going to have problems essentially. And so I was keeping the peace externally at the expense of my own, like I was literally gnashing my teeth,
mm.
subconsciously. So is it selfish to then say, okay, this has to stop? Like I have to choose myself in this? Yes, but like in the most important way. Like we have to give ourselves permission to be selfish at sometimes, especially when it means, um, like clarifying who we are and like self-actualizing, and like that's such a noble pursuit. Like a little bit of selfishness, I think, is totally allowed here because
Yeah.
you're fighting for yourself.
Yeah, I think I'd maybe reframe it to call it self-preserving because like the oxygen mask thing is about self-preserving. You're able to preserve
Hmm.
other life by preserving your own, and because selfish, I think really has a connotation of the guy who trades the family van for a sports car or something.
Oh,
It's like
sure.
this isn't gonna help anybody. This is just you having a little breakdown, and then we'll all see you when you dye your hair and change your wardrobe and whatever, and finally figure out this was all a mistake.
Hmm.
um what you're talking about, it like has physical repercussions. I was the same way. My blood pressure was going up. My doctor was like, what's going on with you? And it's like, just
Hmm.
stress, and
Yep.
it really feels like white knuckling it through your existence, and then and other people around like other
Hmm.
people around you can see it to a certain
Yeah.
degree. You're not the best version of yourself, and then you come in this massive crisis of, I get that my life is not about me. Like I've got kids, I've got a wife, I've got a business, there are a lot of people who I'm responsible to, who are dependent on me. And at the same time, I cannot live with this anymore. And so I
Hmm.
have to do something else. And so call it
Totally.
selfish if you want to, but it's not going to continue either way. It's
Right.
not going to continue whether it's by my death or whether it's by me making some choices here that you don't agree with. But I
Yeah.
have to live this life. I have to be here for my kids' weddings. If God hates me for making this choice, for investigating these things, for living with these convictions that are so deep down, I don't even necessarily know where they come from, then like I don't know if we can hang. Like I
Yeah.
don't know if we can have a relationship, because either he's not good, he doesn't love me the way that I've been taught my whole life, or I'm so far gone, so broken, despite kind of all the evidence to the contrary. Living in my middle class suburban Omaha neighborhood, like
How
that
dare you, Raj?
I live a very stable, dependable life for a lot of people.
But you
Um,
asked the wrong questions, so you are
exactly.
therefore yes. Mhm.
um, you talked about a traumatic event. You talk about it in the book. In the book, you just call it a breaking, and I've got to admit, it's one of the like best and most frustrating parts of the book,
Mm.
because, just being a naturally curious person, I'm like, I mean, you have to tell us what it is.
Yeah.
There's even that like kind of church gossip, like what happened to you? Maybe it happened to me too, kind of thing.
Hmm.
Um, and at the same time, it's such a gift because it's not going to be the same for everybody. So can you kind of talk about like that process of going like, oh, this is a moment that I don't come back from the same way.
We all have trauma, whether it's little t trauma or capital T trauma. Like we all have these things. For me, yeah, like it was like the death of the death of something in my life
Mm,
that had occurred, and so the delineation between the before and after was very stark for me. So it wasn't hard. It wasn't hard for me to be, to say like, oh yes, this is a breaking. And the decision not to specify in the book actually came from some of my earliest readers. So I started like very messy, bloody blogging this book, and I was it was picked up by an author, Tish Oxenreider, and she shared my blog. And so after that, I was getting thousands and thousands of readers. Like it became this very public thing. And I had a bunch of people reach out to me and they would say things like, "Thank you so much for writing. I also experienced a miscarriage." Or they would say, "Thank
mm,
you so much for writing. I also was evicted from like my church community." Or I also had like a medical like diagnosis or something. Like they were seeing themselves so clearly in the story that they didn't think twice about reaching out and saying, "Hey, I also had what you had." And
mm,
none of those things were my particular situation.
mm,
So when I finally sat down and decided to make it like a proper manuscript, a proper book, I decided to maintain that and to keep it a secret because I wanted people to be able to see themselves in the story. And it was either a very good idea or a very bad idea. I don't know. We'll see, as it gains more readers. But that was my motivation.
I think it's brilliant. Like I said, I think it's a gift to the readers ultimately, I mean, in a couple of directions. One is it allows everybody to see themselves in the book, but then also there's such a dignity to not using your situation as social media fodder. And it's like kind of reclaiming this human dignity of going like, I can tell the story and I can say what's important without having to just completely expose myself to the world. So I think it's beautiful. I should say it 1,000 times during this interview, but your book is so beautifully written. I
Oh,
I
thank
was one
you.
of those people who very early found the blog, and I was just like, holy cow, this girl can write. And
Oh,
for those
thank
who
you.
know me at all, I don't say that often.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. I hope that other people see it that way. And I at the end of the day, I wanted the story not to be like a trauma dump. I feel like we
Yeah.
all every day are walking through like the news gives us a new reason every day to despair and to think the worst of our fellow humans. I wanted this story to not be about the breaking. I wanted it to be about everything that happens after and the healing story.
Where would you say you are now with faith things?
Mm. I think, well, for context, I've started viewing deconstruction less like a journey and more like a cycle. I
Mm,
read a book this year and it's totally changed my brain chemistry. It's called Women Who Run with the Wolves. And there is the author in that book, she's very intentional to talk about what she calls the life death life cycle.
mm,
And so it's not the life cycle, it's not even the life to death cycle, it's the life death life cycle. So I'm adopting that view in my spirituality because it's something we see in nature. Like the forest survives because it has the ability to die and regrow over and over and over. And that's humanity. That's all around us in nature. And so I'm seeing that a lot in my own spirituality as well. So I'm viewing, like my early years in evangelicalism, there was a lot of life there. I mean, I was growing, I was learning things, and then I entered into a death season, and there was some very aggressive pruning, and there was some die off that happened, and now I'm kind of entering back into this life season that feels very fresh, and there's a lot of like blooming happening, and so that's kind of where I am now, and it looks completely different from the very first life season, if you will, that I had. I am very like adamant and devoted to the red letters. I feel like Jesus is important and revolutionary, and the stuff that he says matters. Beyond that, it's kind of like a very spiritual outlook that I have on the world, and nothing really is off limits. And I am learning to trust my inner voice and to know like when something feels like life, when something feels true, I follow that. And so if that exists in Hinduism or in Baha'ism or in, Sikhs, I'm so finding so much inspiration in Sikhism, that I follow that. And, a lot of that stuff, once you like dig into it without a closed mind, you see like, wow, there is actually a lot of Jesus all over the world. And how did I miss out on it for so long?
Yeah, yeah. I know that hearing that, most of our evangelical friends would be like, "Blah, that's dangerous. It's it's really worldly. You're being deceived." How do you wrestle with that? Like, how do you interact with? Because I'm sure you even have that voice internally, which I still do, of
Mm-hmm.
like, "Oh, don't touch that. It's across this line." How do you deal with that?
Yeah, yeah, no, I totally understand. Like, because I went to apologetics camps growing up. Like, that's how I spent my summers. Like, I know all the answers. I know all the apologetics. And I am now like I haven't abandoned my brain, and there are definitely things like, for example, I can recognize that the reincarnation, the cyclical nature in Hinduism is inherently hierarchical, and so it ranks life in this hierarchy, and women are kind of not in a great spot on that hierarchy. So like that does not feel right to me. Like I like that there's something in my spirit that catches, to use very like churchy language.
Mhm.
So like I'm still engaged. I'm still thinking things through, and I use the red letters as kind of like my north star. But yeah, I don't know. I hear the voices, like I said, like I hear the people say those things, and I hear like my mom's voice or my mother-in-law's voice, like I hear them in my head, but ultimately, like, I'm not going to be standing next to them when I die. I'm not going to be standing next to them when I reach that final point. And I want to be able to look back and say that I used my brain and my conscience and my heart and my spirit. Like I lived fully embodied in my own spirituality, whatever that looks like.
Yeah, I think that that's such an important moment for somebody who deconstructs, which is just like learning that you were created good. The Bible talks about it in Genesis 1 that, you know, creation was good. Sure, all of the, sin has entered the world and infected everything and all of that. But I think what's interesting about that is that it seems to apply to some people and not to others. Like if your
Mm-hmm.
pastor says it, then you should 100% take it as gospel because it's from the word of God, all those things, because other people have said so. Kind of neglects the word people in that sentence. If you're subject to, whatever effects of sin, and corruption in your life, and that which is making you seek out all these crazy things, then like how is it not true that these people are also subject to sin and corruption and all those things? Even in my own lifetime, I've talked about this on the Substack. Went from people saying that we should fast and pray that Bill Clinton doesn't get elected because he's such an immoral man, to those people then turning and saying that Donald Trump is God's chosen person. James Dobson, who's like one of the most conservative people in the world, said, decried Bill Clinton, but then says that Trump's a baby Christian. And it's
Right.
like, come on, guys, like
Yeah.
we're not even trying to be honest with ourselves anymore. And I'm sure I just
Mm-hmm.
made a bunch of people angry who I used to go to church with.
I feel like it's an interesting space right now because I feel like before it was easier to separate politics from your own spirituality, and maybe that's because I was younger and now I'm in my 30s. And but I feel like in the last 10 years are that there are more political reasons for spiritual deconstruction than there have been, and it's for that very reason. It's for it's because we've watched our communities baptize this behavior and this man and call it good, and a lot of people just we just cannot reconcile that. They cannot. I cannot understand it.
Yeah. Well, the thing is that you're not imagining it. Like it's not just because you were young and naive and whatever. In I think it was in the 1970s, roughly 50% of churchgoers were Democrat, 50% were Republican in Protestant churches, and now that number is much closer to 80-90% Republican in these churches. Not only that, there's a great PBS documentary from I want to say like the mid 2000s that talks about the creation of wedge issues, and because like Bill Clinton and George Bush were so similar in their political beliefs. Like
Mm,
we as a country essentially just kind of got into this middle ground. Even Reagan compared to today's Republicans seems very, very middle. You
hmm.
can find clips of Reagan talking about how we have to have a path to citizenship for immigrants who are here not legally in this country, and so they were so
Wow.
similar that it was actually political operatives who were like, we have to find something you can pick a fight over. Now,
Hmm.
you and I both know that that thing was abortion,
Yeah.
because like for the most part, it wasn't the issue that it was up until the mid 90s. And then these guys were like, oh, this is the thing that peels off soccer moms. Like, this is the
Hmm.
thing that gets people really hot under the collar and says, like, that guy is evil because
Right.
he does or doesn't support abortion. And so I think that's actually, for me, one of the reasons for deconstruction is because I know what happened. Like there's a freaking documentary about it, about what happened of like that we were being divided from each other, and the evangelical church had so little intellectual strength that it bought it hook, line, and sinker. That like you
Mm,
cannot be a person of faith and not be a Republican. They
wow.
bought that, and even as the party slid towards racist rhetoric, even as it slid towards isolationism, not upholding our responsibility in the world to other human beings to get power,
Yeah.
and that for me was one of the ways I knew that like in a lot of ways the church left me, the evangelical
Mm,
church left me. Tim Keller talks about how a lot of our objections with the church are things we learned in church,
yeah.
you know,
100%.
and so the things that like it's your fault for teaching me this. It's your fault for
Hmm.
teaching me the golden rule and all of those things. And then when I sit here and go, I don't think we're doing it, then you can't be like apostate. Like
Right.
no 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 no. Like you're the one who taught me this, and I
Yeah.
internalized it, right or wrong. I internalized it.
Hmm.
So no, you're not imagining it. Imagining it. It is one of my biggest frustrations with this whole process is that there was definitely a time in the recent history in living people's memories that church wasn't like this,
Wow.
and now you are forced to choose politically, and
Hmm.
it's a huge mess and it's not sustainable.
It's only going to fuel this deconstruction thing, I think, the
It
longer.
is,
Yeah.
yeah, because it puts people in a position where their conscience is telling them. It's not just your heart or some fluffy vibey thing. It's like your conscience is being seared. It is being like offended
Hmm.
by some of the things that are happening. Like
Yeah.
honestly, like, I thought that Donald Trump's political career was over the
Hmm.
second that he made fun of a reporter with a disability.
Oh,
Like I thought it was
100%.
done. I was like, you
Hmm.
cannot do that, like ever. Can you imagine a pastor getting up and doing that in a church? They would get fired.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
I mean, in today's climate, I honestly don't know anymore. But like, but there's just it crosses the lines of human decency and hits the
Hmm.
conscience, and then you have to go whoa, and then you have people saying no, this is God's chosen person. And it's like, well, I'm sorry, but like your interpretation of what God wants and my conscience, which I thought was formed by Christian values,
Hmm.
are at odds here. And so
Yeah.
now I'm being forced to choose. And
Yes.
to your point earlier, it's not something that I wanted. It's not something that I chose. I mean, I got a degree in ministry. I thought I was going to be doing this for 40 years. I thought I was going to
Hmm.
retire a pastor. Um, and
Yeah.
I did not want to leave that. I didn't want to change careers. I wanted to become great at it. I wanted to help a lot of people. And now I find myself writing writing Substack articles about why why that's not happening anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. Man.
So, India plays a huge. This is such an interesting episode because there's like structure and no structure all at the same time.
Oh,
Um,
it's a good chat. I'm having fun.
um, so India plays such a huge role in your it's sort of in your deconstruction, but also it was such a huge role in your kind of healing and openness and exploration. How and why was India so important to this? What was so interesting, so pivotal about India in your story?
Yeah. So India. I'm a pretty well traveled person, I'll say. I was not prepared for traveling to India. Being in India, there's like a million different ways that India asks you to trust. As a Western woman, so it was like I was talking to my publisher recently, and I said it was like evolution inertia. So
Mm,
I was faced with all of these like tiny little opportunities to trust people, but also really big opportunities too, where I'm at the mercy of, like, I'm getting in a car with someone who doesn't speak the same language as me, and that's a require. You have to trust. You have to step into trust with that person, and coming from a massive kind of like betrayal and this loss of trust in self and institutions and other people, like it was such like exposure therapy for me, and juxtaposed with like the scary element of that, it also was so beautiful because India, like you've written in your Substack before, but India is the most warm, hospitable, beautiful place. And I don't care if people say that I'm biased because like I've been there now 4 times, but it just is. It just is. The people are so lovely, and so there was kind of this like abrasive but healing kind of treatment that I got when I was in the hands of India.
yeah, I think that's such an interesting, such a beautiful way to put it. India, it might be the most different place that you can travel on this planet. Like in terms of language, worldview. A place that if you get dropped in feels the most like another planet on this
Mm-hmm.
planet. I would say India's maybe at the top of that list.
A hundred
And
percent.
it's the sights, it's the smells. It's also such an old country. It challenges our our sense of superiority of going like, well, there's only one way to build things in the world, and there's only one way to
Mm-hmm.
exist in the world. And then you look at these people who are from the cradle of the birth of time, and go, well, they're actually doing fine. Don't get me wrong,
Yeah.
lots of problems, lots of challenges in that country, but it really challenges your sense of like, is there really only one way to do things? And evangelicalism is so about dogma, about I
Mm-hmm.
was going to say orthodoxy, but that's not even right. Like it's beyond orthodoxy. It's about a dogmatic understanding of truth, that when you go to India and you're in these situations where you're like, they're doing everything I wouldn't do, like they're speaking
Mm-hmm.
another language, they're polytheistic, they believe in reincarnation, karma, like all these things that I was taught are wrong. And then you're put in these situations where you I laughed really hard. It's probably not as funny as I laughed at, but at the story about you getting sick in India, because I've been very sick twice in India, and the way you talk about having to trust other people to almost literally carry you
Mm-hmm.
in that, it it creates this weird dynamic where you're like, they're doing everything not the way that I would do it, and I have to trust them, and it's good, and it worked out
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
That's the crazy part, is like, oh, maybe there's more. Like maybe truth, to your point earlier, isn't just confined here.
Mm-hmm.
Um maybe these people actually do have a ton of virtue and a lot of goodness that we can learn from, instead of
Yeah.
bringing in this superior mindset and going like, I'm here to teach,
Yeah.
I've got this figured out.
Yeah, and that's something I had to grapple with too. And I don't write about it as much in my book. And it took a long time for me to understand that this loss of trust, or this inability to give trust to people, was really me being a control freak. And
Mm,
and it's a self-preservation thing. Like, you preserve that because you're afraid of being harmed and you're afraid of being hurt. So you say, this can only be done my way. This can only, I have to have control over the timing and who's there and all of the things. And that is just so antithetical to loving people. You can't control them and love them deeply at the same time. So
yeah, a hundred
for
percent.
me, yeah, so in learning to trust again, I had to learn to give up control. And that is something that we as evangelicals hate to do. Like, everything has to be controlled and approved, and like that's how we are on the inside, is because
Yeah.
we have control over these things. And I just feel like everybody should travel. Everybody should get out and they should say, I'm going to be out of control. I'm not going to be the one that's calling the shots. And I'm just going to see. I'm just going to trust fall into the arms of humanity and go from there. And it's not all going to be great. You might get really sick. Like, I got really sick. But ultimately, that was so instrumental for me to relearn how to trust people and myself, was just to relinquish that control.
Yeah. India has played a big part in my deconstruction as well, even though my first time I was there when I was 5, second time I was there when I was 9, and then I didn't go back again until 2008, so I would have been whatever that number was, 24. And I feel like each time I've taken a different lesson away. The first two especially was, I was 5, so I didn't have a I didn't have a nuanced understanding of the world. I knew that I was very far from home because we took a very long plane ride. I knew that I
Mm-hmm.
didn't speak the language. I knew I couldn't get a cheeseburger. Like there were
Yes.
things. A lot of comfort had been taken away. But I also found, because that trip was to visit family, that it's like there's a lot of ways that we're different, but it feels exactly like going to visit my grandma.
Mm,
It's these are the same kind of people that we have here, even if everything else is different. I
yeah.
would say for me, this the second time, I was 9, and so I saw the poverty. I saw the, I saw children begging on the streets, and it's very weird to be 9 years old, to be on a vacation with your family on the other side of the world, whatever that cost, and then to see children your own age with deformities who are begging on the streets for their lives. And I remember, yeah, I remember asking my mom, like, what can we do about it? And she's like, I mean, not really anything, And what she meant was, we're here for, a short period of time. We don't have billions of dollars in aid to give away. It's like, yes, we could give a sandwich now, but it's
Yeah.
not, I mean, ultimately going to change the trajectory of this person, this system, all of this. Like, it'd be a drop in the bucket for what we could actually do. Um, but I mean, I gained a global mindset at the age of 9. I'm just going like,
Wow.
whoa, like there's massive inequality in this world,
Yeah.
and I'm gonna be thinking about this for the rest of my life. I've been wrestling with the church from literally the age of 9, because every church that doesn't have a missions program or doesn't operate in any kind of relief ways, caring for orphans and widows and all those things, because we need to raise money for the new $20 million building.
Yeah.
I can't bring myself to care about that
Oh man.
organization. I cannot
That
bring myself to contribute to that.
that bothers me so much. And my husband is still involved because, this is a totally different thing, talking about deconstructing in marriage. We could talk about that,
Oh
I'm
yeah.
sure.
Oh yeah, for
But
sure.
yeah, he's still involved in a megachurch right down the street, to kind of mentor and invest in some teen boys. But he has a very global perspective as well, and so he always, he'll come back every week, and he's just like, I can't even believe the money we spend on lights and these smoke machines and like unbelievable stuff. Meanwhile, he's like, I'm having conversations with my boys, and the boys who are, I guess, maybe juniors in high school, they pick up on that stuff too. Like, a lot of
Yeah.
people are saying, wait a second, this just doesn't add up. This doesn't feel like Jesus.
I'll probably share this on the Substack at some point, but I remember going to Willow Creek, which was one of the biggest, 30,000 plus member churches in the US. And I remember the first time I went there, and they had these indoor waterfall features in the lobby. And that was where um, I don't know if I coined this phrase or if I stole it from somebody, but it was what you attract people with, you attract them to. And
Mm,
so if you
damn.
are as a church all about the flat screen TVs, the smoke machines, and this was back when flat screens were prohibitively expensive. The waterfall thing and the nice coffee and all of that. You're attracting them with comfort to comfort, with consumerism to consumerism. It's going to
Hmm.
be very hard to get people in the door with that and go, cool. Now, there was this guy, he said you have to die to yourself. He said, give away all your possessions to the poor. So we're going to start doing that now. And they're like, are you
Yeah.
kidding me? There's a waterfall in the lobby. Like, I
Hmm.
didn't come here because I want to I want to like live in sackcloth and ashes. I came here because like it's decently comfortable and we want to teach our children Bible stories and whatever. But like, don't switch me out like this. That's crazy. That's
Yeah.
bait and switch.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, for sure.
third time I went to India, um, it's interesting because I don't even know how to interpret that experience now because I was with an evangelical group. We were sharing the gospel, and I saw stuff that I don't understand. I saw
Mm.
what I would describe as an exorcism. I saw what I would describe as a healing, and um, there's always, of course, the possibility that things are staged or whatever. But it all seemed pretty real in the moment, and so it's weird to go through a point of crisis in your faith where you're like, I'm not sure if any of this is real, but then also have writing in the background of your mind going like, okay, but I've seen some stuff,
Yeah.
and and again, this is a process nobody would ever choose because it's like I think another thing that people should know is like it's not like you get to take a year off and go explore this.
Hmm.
You're doing it on Tuesday while you're at work.
Yes.
You're like
Hmm.
sitting at your desk going like, was that exorcism staged? Did they know that like we were coming as Americans and so they wanted us to like have a really cool spiritual experience and what like you're
Mm.
thinking about that while you're like, oh yeah, I probably should send that email.
Oh, and also I have carpool duty, and yeah, yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
wild.
I have so much respect for because I don't have kids. So I feel like that's a
No.
whole other level on this because not only are you asking yourself these questions, but you also are tasked with raising kids who are probably also asking questions. So all power to you guys, you parents.
That has been maybe the hardest thing about this is that I still deeply want to instill great values into my kids and church has been such a big part of that for me. And I don't trust that environment right now to teach my kids that, but to not teach them selfishness and
Yeah.
racism and exclusion and all of those things that it's like I right now it's sort of like, well, I'm going to take my chances on other environments or myself to teach these values to my kids because all the baggage that I picked up with it doesn't seem worth it at this point. And my
Yeah.
kids can judge me and my kids can, bill me for their therapy later in life for not taking him to youth group or whatever. Uh, but but just knowing all of the stuff I've had to undo from that environment, it didn't seem like the benefits were worth the cost. And
Mm,
it's
yeah.
so hard knowing that you only get to do this once. It's interesting too. So you talked about marriage, and my wife went through. We both basically went through deconstruction at the same time and didn't talk about it, which
Mm,
is wild. We got married because of our faith.
hmm.
We were attracted to each other because she went to a Christian college, I went to a Christian college. She wanted to serve God with her life, I wanted to do the same. And so then to get to a point where it's like, I don't even know if this stuff is real, and if it is, I'm not going to be able to do it the same way that I used to. There were things that we picked up on from each other, like we stopped praying together, which I know is going to make us sound horribly sinful and whatever, um but it was because it felt like the prayers were hitting the ceiling. It
Yeah.
felt like there were just so many barriers. She ended up becoming Catholic in this whole process.
Oh,
um
wow.
and so talk about, I'm actually glad to hear that you and Tim haven't figured it out yet.
Yeah, so it was similar, I think. I think we both kind of started in different in different seasons. We weren't super vocal about it. That traumatic event in my life, of course, impacted him as well because he now had this kind of fractured spouse. So it impacted both of our stories in different ways. I would say that in learning to give myself permission to land wherever, to leave it all on the table and say, I don't know what happens at the end of this, but I'm here with myself. Like I'm going to see it through. Giving myself permission to do that also gave me permission to do that with him. And I hope he would say the same thing. But it's, I mean, if you're saying I have the right to leave this all, put it all down and start fresh and figure out what I really believe, you also are giving them permission to do the same thing. And you may not land in the same place. You know, you may
Yeah.
come to different conclusions. And like I said, like it's a cycle. Like I am a little wary of people who are like, oh, I deconstructed, as if it's like done. You know what I mean? I'm like, you're in for an awakening, I think. Because it's similar to grief, honestly. And it's not that it goes away, it just kind of changes, and it changes the cycle. So sometimes I will dip back down into, you know, like being very jaded and very, you know, just in that like a not trusting space again,
Yeah.
where he will maybe be in kind of like a life season where he's, you know, he's listening to worship music and he's you know, he's finding spirituality. He's really right now into the Soul Boom podcast, so he's like experiencing all
Yeah.
of these different spiritualities, which is beautiful. And yeah, I think that the main thing is like I love him and he loves me, no matter who that person like shifts and ebbs and flows into. We're committed to each other regardless. So
Yeah.
for us, like that was our journey. And there were definitely times, you know, when I would say things, or I would be in a season that freaked him out, and vice versa. And that's okay. And you get through it. You know, you just remember like I love this person and I love who they're becoming, no matter what that looks like. You know, of
Yeah.
course, unless, you know, they become like a Nazi or something psycho, but like, you know, like just these iterations are okay. And honestly, it's
Yeah.
like you get to fall in love with a new person. You get to like explore a new person and see what they're thinking. Nobody wants to be like stagnant or married to someone stagnant the rest of their lives. So it's like it's a beautiful thing if you can pull on that perspective.
It's interesting to me the what seems like a contradiction in deconstruction, you know, where it's like I am walking away from the dogma that I was indoctrinated with growing up, and at the same time, you know, what you just described in your marriage is unconditional love and a
Hmm.
lot of humility. And
Yeah.
so it's weird how it's like the more that I go into this process of deconstruction, of really owning my own faith, redefining it on completely different terms, it does produce fruit. Like it's
Hmm.
virtuous. There's stuff that comes out of it that's really good, and there's a lot of stuff that I've thrown off that I didn't like about myself,
Yeah.
about like seeing conversations with other people as projects or opportunities to witness or whatever, and I find myself a lot more present in a lot more rooms.
Hmm.
Playing a whole other game of like, where's my spiritual in with this person. I've so much more compassion for everyone now after
Yeah.
going through this process, because anybody who doesn't believe, I'm like, I get it, you know.
Hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
yep, there's a lot of reasons not to. I don't really know fully where I'm going to end up, but I know that every person I meet now who's got questions, who's got scars, who's got all sorts of things, I get it a little bit more than I used to, and I have a lot more compassion on it, and I can start from that place instead of going, no, 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 here's the right way. It's a
Or
lot
just from
more.
that like
Yeah.
assumption that they're wrong, you know, like you
Yeah.
walk into it with
Yep.
an assumption that I've already discounted this person I'm talking to, and
Yeah.
how ugly is that, you know?
Yeah. There was some writings of Mother Teresa that came out, I don't know, maybe 5 or 10 years ago, where she expressed like having significant doubts, like wondering whether or not God was real, kind of doubts. And evangelicals were so scandalized by it. They're like, oh my gosh, like it almost like a desire to bury it. And I feel like everybody else was going like, do you know what kind of stuff she saw? Of course she
Yeah.
wondered. Like,
Hmm.
of course she was like, where's the goodness? Like, where's the compassion? Where's the mercy? Like, is this all real? Am I doing what I'm supposed to do with my life? How
Mm.
would you not wonder about that on your bed at night, especially when you're not like numbing that all with TV and social media? Like
Yeah.
if it's like I'm gonna deal with sick people all day and then I'm gonna go lay in a quiet room for 12 hours, well,
Yeah.
you're gonna have some thoughts. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, and I've recently become kind of captivated by the like female mystics of the early church,
yeah,
um, and how they because so many of them talk about this, like Teresa and Marjorie Kemp, and like all of these mystics. They talk about it, and the like feminist woo woo side of me wonders if there's a connection between being a person who lives with like the moon cycles, like in our bodies we biologically are taught to expect, like, you will be filled with life and then you will be emptied of it, to be filled with life again and then to be emptied of it. And I
yeah.
wonder if we had more input from these people in the pulpits, would we also be taught to expect these seasons? Would we not be so blindsided? Would we not be so shattered when we have these doubts and these questions and these dry spells? Would we be able to look at it more like, no, this is a death season and it precedes a life season. So I have to sit with it. I have to give it acknowledgement. I have to pay it what it's due in order for something new to bloom. You know what I mean?
Oh, I absolutely. There was an episode of This American Life that focused on testosterone, and it was fascinating. One of the things that they did, there was a story about someone who was transitioning from female to male, and so it was on a much higher dose of testosterone than anybody would be biologically. What this person experienced in terms of like sort of desire for domination and sexual attraction and like all these things, um, just influenced by this one chemical,
Mm.
it actually affected the way that I looked at the church. So much of what you're going to see in the evangelical church is, all right, our building is full. We need to find a new spot for a new building that's bigger, or we need to go to another land or another city or whatever to make more Christians because we kind of like filled up this spot. It's so close to manifest destiny in
Mm.
the early Americas,
Yeah.
where it's just like, this is what we do: we colonize, we go, we conquer. And it's such a it's such a male way of interpreting the world. It's fascinating how we don't even stop to consider if that's influencing us spiritually. One question I have for you is like, what relationship do you have? It's a two-part question. So what relationship do you have with current evangelicals? You probably have some in your family and friends from that world, all that. So what relationship do you have with them? And then the other question, which I'll reiterate after you answer the first, is what relationship do you have with the deconstruction community? Because I feel like there's tension there too. So
Hmm.
let's start with the evangelicals though. Like what relationship do you have with people who are still in that world?
Yeah, I have a lot of friends who are still very much in that world, in various degrees. Some are more gung ho about it, especially in our family. Tim comes from a missionary family, so we still have that. My family, like I've mentioned, like I was home educated. They're very much steeped in that. And I think it's hard. I think there are people in those groups that if they were pressed or if we were one on one, they would come. They would say that they're struggling with these questions, or maybe they have doubts, so they're in a different season of their faith. It's hard to know because again, like, and we understand it's very difficult to ask that first question and to make that first move, and it makes it more real. Like, I guess I'm really doing this, I guess I'm really deconstructing. So I can't speak for them individually, but we have, I would venture to say most of our community is very involved still in kind of the evangelical spaces.
Do you feel either pity for them or any level of judgment?
Yeah, this I had to go through a lot of growth with this, because it is very easy, and I have learned that it's that very binary, you're in or you're out mentality that was kind of heirloomed to me from these communities, and I'm just now on the other side. So I have to resist the temptation to fall back into that in or out mentality by saying, oh, they're out, they don't get it,
Yeah.
like they're idiots, whatever. Because it's just as insidious when it comes from this side as when it comes from this side, I've
Yeah.
found. And when I was really kind of deep in my deconstruction process, I worked for a ministry, which I write about in my book.
Mhm.
Deconstructing while being in ministry is a whole terrible, terrible thing. So disorienting. But I remember I bought a shirt from the Preemptive Love Coalition, and it said
Mm.
"Love Anyway" on it, and I kind of
Yeah.
wore it as like, I was like planting my flag amongst all of these evangelicals, that I felt had gotten it wrong, and I felt so convicted while wearing this shirt because I realized that the people that I wasn't loving anyway, as it said on my shirt, I wasn't loving those people around me. Like I was able to give more grace and love to like the Hindu man that I saw on the streets of Calcutta, but not the people that were around me. And it was just this really, really convicting moment when I realized, like, oh, when Jesus says that, like, I have to love the misfit or the person, that is difficult for me to love, he's talking about these crazies, he's talking about these wackos. He's not talking about the Hindu man in Calcutta because it's easy for me to love him. It's easy for me to see God in him. It's not so easy for me to see it in my coworkers when we're approached on the street by a homeless guy who's asking for money and my coworker asks him why he doesn't have a job. That's when it's hard for me to love them. You know what I mean?
Mm.
And
Oh yeah.
I don't mean love like, oh, they just get a pass and they get to do whatever they want. Like that's not what love looks like in that case. But I was turning myself off to these people in my life, and I had to really reckon with the fact that like I'm preaching something to myself in solitude that I am not then following, when I get out amongst people who are very difficult to love, which is like Republicans and evangelicals and people who haven't done like the shadow work to understand their misogyny or their racism. Like that is hard. Those are the people that are hard for me to love.
I think that's such a great way of saying it, is that the binary of like you're in or you're out. If we carry that over, then what's the point in deconstructing?
It breeds kind of like this ideological purity that
Yeah.
I see in a lot of progressive spaces as well as the conservative spaces. And they're
Yeah.
like it of course it's hard. We want to slouch into the binary because then it makes it easy. We know that we're in or and they're out or whatever. But
Yeah.
sitting with the tension, I feel like is such a sacred calling because it's
Yeah.
standing in the tension, you become like a suspension bridge. And people, I'm creating space for, the moment when somebody, maybe one of my in-laws or something says, actually, I'm so glad I'm not the only one that's been like thinking these questions. I've
Yeah.
now created a bridge because I haven't labeled them out of my,
Yeah.
whatever my ideological purity requirements.
I have a lot of compassion for people if they are finding comfort, if they're finding peace in the evangelical church that they have not found anywhere else. There was a long time where I was just like, gosh, it would be so much easier just to be able to write this whole thing off. To
Yeah.
be like, to find the evidence, go, this is a cult or this is demonic or whatever, and go, look, here's the proof. But the really hard part about it is goes, actually, there's a lot of really good things that happen there too.
Hmm.
And it's not for me. I know that for sure because I was very, very hurt in those environments. And I don't have any level of trust that I could exist in one of those environments, my kids could exist in one of those environments and walk away having had it been beneficial overall
Yeah.
for us. You still have a semblance of faith. And so you're not full tilt baby with the bath water thing. And so do you find yourself like kind of not cool enough to sit at the cool kid table in deconstruction, or yeah,
Totally.
what are you finding your reception there?
Totally. And you know what I liken it to? I liken it to being the kid that grows up in the youth group that wants that bad boy reputation, like you just wrote about. you know
Yeah.
like we all want that, and it's so funny that I'm now seeing that in the deconstructed space too. And yeah, it's tough because and it's part of that tension. It's part of living in the tension because for some people in the deconstruction community, I'm not deconstructed enough, but like you said, like I still hold very tightly to the red letters, and sometimes for some people that's even too much. There's this weird thing where I'm not deconstructed enough to be with like my secular allies, but I'm way too deconstructed to be, you know, speaking at like women's conferences and stuff like that. Like that's absolutely that's not me. So it's this weird in between, you know, it's this weird in
Yeah.
between where I have to just be true to what I've found and what I believe, and yeah, that's enough for now.
Yeah. Yeah. I identify with that so much. I feel like I know there are people who are reading Rage Against the Machine who are like waiting for, and that's how I made my way back to Jesus.
Mhm.
And that is like, it's just a very long sermon to them. It was just like, wow, we're going through the dark parts, and I feel like I'm going to disappoint those people because like I don't know where it ends. But then I also feel like I'm disappointing people on the other side who, who expect me to go much farther than I'm going, and I don't know if I'm ever going to, and I don't know if I want to. And I'm not
Mhm.
just trading an evangelical pastor with a bachelor's degree from a Bible college for a former evangelical pastor now telling me again what I have to do. Like that's
Yeah.
not what I'm going to do anymore.
Mhm.
And it's so hard because it sounds so self-important to me. Like when I say it, it's just like I have to trust myself, and it's like, oh, like I just immediately don't feel great about it. And at the same time, um, I know that I spent so long burying things. I've talked about this in other places, but like I started watching The West Wing in 2004, 2005, and loved it. Like it is my favorite show of all time. If you were to kind of like write my soul onto TV, it's pretty probably the closest thing I've ever found. The president there is a Democrat. He's a Catholic. He's personally pro-life, but publicly pro-choice. I remember 20 years ago feeling like, uh-oh, just like
Yeah.
uh, there's some things that make sense here.
Uh-huh.
I've got some struggles, but just stuffing them. I graduated in 2006, so from Bible college. So it's like, okay, I'm just gonna live with these tensions, and I'll occasionally like teach a lesson or preach something that like challenges people, and that's gonna be my contribution, is be a little bit of a reformer. But it really denied the reality of the rift that was growing, and then it kind of opened like a floodgate about 10
Mhm.
years ago, just going like, oh, there's too much behind this wall now, and
Yeah.
I'm finding myself not living authentically. I'm not living
Mhm.
in congruence with my values, um on both sides, because like part
Yeah.
of the value in the church is like confession and being honest and telling the truth, and I wasn't doing that. I was only giving part of myself to that world, and I
Mm.
had to stop.
Oh, I'm so glad you did, because you're so full of wisdom, and you're so full of guidance, and you're so full of authenticity that like we would have been robbed of that, Raj, had you still been living in that. So thank you for doing the work, and thank you for showing up. You're choosing to show up in your fullness. That's ultimately what, like, selfishly, one of the reasons why I talk about deconstruction so much is because it gives people the permission to say, you know what, I need to live fully myself, and I'm the one that gets to benefit from that. Like as an outsider, we all benefit when the people around us are alive and healed and fully embodied. You know what I mean?
Thank you for that. Like it is so difficult. Like the programming, like you talked about, is conform to this one way of thinking, and there's no room for debate on it. And I really, really, really did not think that my ministry, quote unquote, to the world would be to help other people not be a part of this, or
Mm-hmm.
not conform, or to ask really difficult questions. I thought I was going to be helping people find that predefined path, because I really truly thought that was the truth completely, and that anything in me that was in tension with that was wrong, and it was just a matter of time before it got refined out. This is almost literally the opposite of what I thought was going to happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I think a lot of prophets, like, not to be like church girl, like dipping back into that again, but I feel like people, like if you dig into the prophets of the Old Testament, they would say the same stuff. Like, what do you
Yeah.
mean? I have to talk truth to power, and I have to say these things that no one wants to hear, and I have to ask questions, and like No wonder they were such like a mopey bunch. Like I resonate with that because I'm like, what do you mean? I was like the kid in youth group. I was like going to apologetics camps. I was like raised to be a titan. And now I'm confused because I have these questions and I have this journey that I'm on, and now I'm speaking about this. Like I don't know. But then part of me is like, maybe that was always going to happen. Like this was always
Yeah.
your role to play.
That's beautiful. Ecclesiastes and Jeremiah were always my favorite of all the
Yeah.
prophetic literature, and it's not surprising.
Yes,
Uh,
that makes
I
sense.
I want to reiterate how beautiful your book is on so many levels. It's both a really interesting story, like just you experiencing India. It has some of the qualities of like Anthony Bourdain, of that kind of just like transporting you to a different world. You getting to go to places in India that I haven't been to, and like the Ganges is somewhere I've not been to in India, and how viscerally you describe that experience, and so it's got a great travel log quality to it, and spiritual memoir, and deconstruction, and it's just interesting and beautiful. I think even people who are still in the evangelical environment, or people who have never thought about, weren't raised anywhere near it, I think a lot of people are going to love this book because it's just an interesting point of view, and it's so well written, so well told. I became a huge fan of your writing when you were blogging, and the book so lives up to that quality of writing and storytelling. Everyone should go buy Tiger in a Lifeboat. It's just such a great book. It's challenging, and it's funny, and it's all of the beautiful things. I'm honored to interview you and talk about it. I'm honored to have read early copies of it. Everybody should go get it. It's out the beginning of May here. Please support Lauren's writing. We want many, many more books from her. Tiger in the Lifeboat, such a great book.
Thank you so much, Raj. I can't even tell you how much I appreciate it.
Well, this was a new format for us. As you know, I'm Raj. You can get my book, The Carrying House, on Amazon, and you can get Tiger in the Lifeboat on Amazon and where books are sold as well.